Okay, I think that we can start. Okay, so my name is Antonio Picón from Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. It's my pleasure today to introduce Olga Smirnova, that's going to be the speaker of this session. So it's really a pleasure for me. When I started strong field physics, I read many of her papers. It was very inspirational. So it's really great that she accepted to come and give this lecture. It's kind of timing because of the Nobel Prize Physics in attosecond science. So let me just go through very quickly, very briefly, of her CV. So she did the PhD and studied physics in the Moscow State University. She graduated in 2000, and already in 2006, she was tenure research scientist at the Stacey Institute of Molecular Science of the National Research Council of Canada. And then in 2009, she moved to Berlin, to the Max Born Institute, where right now she is head of the strong field theory group. And also she is having a double affiliation, and she is full professor in the Technische Universität of Berlin. Some of the awards is in 2000, or some of the recent awards, because she has many, is in 2020, she got the Ahmed Sebail Award of the ACS. In 2021, she got the awarded ERC Advance grant. And in 2022, she got the Mildred Dresselhaus Prize of Hamburg. So today she will talk about chirality. This is a topic that she has been working her life. And in particular, she will review the role of chirality and how they interact with strong field lasers and their relation with topology. But let me stress that she has been also working in other systems, also in materials. And one of the more exciting topics that she's doing also that today, unfortunately, she's not going to cover is, for example, strongly correlated materials, what happens when they bring us out of equilibrium with these very strong field lasers. So if I have to say or define Olga, I would say that she is really good in taking one emerging problem and just address it and approach with a lot of creativity and open the route for the others to come. And I think that you will see now, so probably I shouldn't just here stop talking and just please, Olga, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for this introduction. I'm really humbled. And it's a great honor and pleasure to be here and share with you our very recent work on connecting chirality and topology in gas phase molecules and in non-equilibrium dynamics of these molecules. So I will be, first I would like to thank my group. I have luck and I'm being fortunate to work with outstanding, brilliant and creative young scientists. And you see here David Ayuso and Andres Ardanes. They are my first dream team, chiral dream team. They already left the group. So they are both in Imperial and setting up their groups there. I would like to acknowledge my amazing colleague from Technion, Nimrod Moiseev, Misha Ivanov, my beloved husband, and my new generation of students, Philip Flores, Pablo Meyer, Alex Lohr, Astrid Lund, Eike Roos, postdoc Stefanos Kallstrom. And these are also old guard. Emilio and Margarita also already setting up their own groups in in King's College, and Nicola is joining them soon. So I will be speaking about chiral molecules. And of course, you know what chirality is, and you know the basic example of chiral objects are just our two hands, and they are non-superimposable mirror images of each other. No matter how we rotate right hand, it will never look like a left hand. I put here a picture that I produced myself of two fictional characters which are usually known. They are from Lewis Carroll book, and Alice meets them in the imaginary world behind the glass, and they are actually enantiomers of each other. So they are chiral, they are non-superimposable mirror images of each other. If you look at them, you will realize that I just reflected them in the mirror. And they are also full of chiral molecules, and this is actually very true for everyone present here and any living organism. So we are all chiral, and the balance between right and left molecules is broken in our bodies precisely because this broken balance ensures stability of proteins and ensures that metabolic reactions in our bodies go the way they should go. And even more, the enantiomeric axis, this is the quantity which controls the balance between left and right. So if this enantiomeric axis is abnormal, there has been studies that revealed that this figure of merit can be used as a biomarker for a number of diseases. And as we learn more and more about chirality, we realize that we need to be very precise, but also we need a high speed in detecting the enantiomeric axis, in distinguishing left and right in microvolt. And chemists, they have come up with exquisite techniques for detecting and separating enantiomers. All these techniques, they work at the level of thermodynamics and kinetics, so they are precise, but they are slow. They work at the equilibrium state of matter. What I would like to address today is what could be the advantage of non-equilibrium matter, where we could operate with chiral matter at much higher speed using optical pulses, and how we could bring this method to increase both the efficiency and also the speed. And I will connect today particularly to topology because, as we know, topology means robustness. So what is generally the problem with optical methods? We know that light is the fastest agent that interacts with matter. And optical methods, they outpace all other methods in speed. So what is the bottleneck with optical methods is that the chiral feature of light, circularly polarized light is chiral, and its chiral feature is a helix that electric field vector draws in space as light propagates. And the pitch of the helix has a scale of light wavelengths. And if you compare this scale to the size of the molecule, and in our bodies, for example, we have actually medium-sized molecules such as carbohydrates, organic acids, amino acids. They are not that big. And the difference between the scale of the pitch of the light and the size of the molecule so big that molecule basically does not see the chirality of light. So what we learn from this example is that natural circularly polarized light given us by nature is chiral in non-local sense. And then the question that arises, can we express chirality locally? And immediately it sounds like a bit a counterintuitive idea, because chirality is a property which is a spatial property, geometric property, which is determined by the mutual orientations of different parts of an object. So how can it be local? And yet, it can be local, and I will show you a movie which expresses local chirality. So what we are going to look at, what we are looking at right now, is the electric field vector, which now does not trace helix in space, but it traces a chiral figure in time. So what you see here is the red one is the electric field vector of light, and as the light evolves within a single cycle of its evolution, the vector draws a chiral trajectory. And this is definitely chirality encoded in time as opposed to being encoded in space. And because it's encoded in time, it's local. Now, once we have, and you can create such light by combining light of multiple colors, and the requirement of such light is, of course, that the evolution of the vector has to be three-dimensional. Now, how would you quantify this new light? Well, a very intuitive thing is to take a snapshot of electric field vector and 3 consecutive moments of time and make a triple product of such vectors. You see this triple product here. So this is the triple product which shows this quantity that I just described. Now, if this is non-zero, it means that during this trajectory that we followed during the sequence of times, the trajectory came out of plane because it's a triple product non-zero, and it means the trajectory was chiral. Now, what you can do, you can require that chirality remains within the period. So like this, you average over a period and you require that it's non-zero. Then if you do look at it in the frequency domain, what you will see is that the light should have 3 frequencies and the laser field should have 3 non-complanar components at these frequencies. What is interesting about this measure, we call it chiral correlation function, is that it expresses the strengths of interaction of light, which is chiral, locally chiral light, with matter. And you can also build higher momenta by adding scalar products of field at other times, and then you can have higher order correlation functions which actually express the strengths of interaction of this locally chiral light with matter in multi-photon processes. So this would be the process of second order. Next function would be fifth order. That would be the fourth order process, etc. So multi-photon processes. Now, now I need to tell you about the connection to topology. So topology is a different geometric property which basically characterize properties which remain unchanged under continuous transformations. And knot, for example, is one of the examples of a topological object. And I'm putting knot here also because it's an object that connects chirality and topology. So it's really an object in which these two properties linked because the left knot, if it's chiral, it cannot be continuously transformed into its mirror image. So what we know that in chemistry, such knots were synthesized in macromolecules. And you see the picture here, the example of such giant macromolecule which has these topological properties. So this field is topological stereochemistry, and it really yielded these amazing structures which then opened the way to molecular machines, the 2016 Nobel Prize in chemistry, I think. Maybe in physics, sorry. Don't trust me with this, but it's 2016. So what you see here is that chirality and topology are linked in structure. So what I want to do is alternative route, and I would like to combine them in dynamics. So now how we are going to do this? First, why I want to do it? Because the ultra-fast dynamics allows us to have extremely efficient and anti-sensitive observables because of the locality of the chiral light. Now, if we add topological properties to it, then we could hope to have both very sensitive and also robust observables. So this is basically the idea and the vision why we are interested to combine these properties. In my group, we do it right now in 3 different ways. First, we can combine chirality and topology by structuring light and then looking at the optical response. Second is that we can combine chirality and topology in the ultra-fast electronic currents. And third, we can do it by using non-Hermitian dynamics. I will try to cover all 3 approaches if it fits into the time. So I start with the topology via light, via structuring light. So I told you that we can do locally chiral light. Once you've got the idea that you can control the light handedness locally, you can then ask yourself, why don't we then control it both locally and globally? That we can engineer chirality of light local such it changes in a specific way in the interaction region. And what we thought of was to create a chiral vortex. So that was the idea of Emilio Pisanti when he came to my group. And we decided to go for it. And the setup that we have come up with are the 2 circularly polarized fields at frequency omega and 2 omega, and they are counter-rotating. And each of them has orbital angular momentum. So these are vortex beams. Now, to have local chirality, what you need is to have 3-dimensional field, which means that we need a longitudinal component of the field. So if you tightly focus these beams, they develop longitudinal component. And the Lissajous figure of this field is shown here. And this light can be characterized by the topological charge. So I will show you now how this light looks in the polarization plane. So this is the polarization plane. And what you see is the intensity of such light. And it's a donut because it has orbital angular momentum, precisely because it's a topological. So this is what you look now is polarization plane. And this is the picture of light in space, in the polarization plane. Now I introduced before the correlation function, chiral correlation function, which expresses the handedness of light. And what you see here is the modulus of the chiral correlation function. It also forms a donut, and where there is a non-zero value, which is red, you have chiral properties. Now, the topology is actually expressed in the phase of the correlation function, as you see here. So the phase of the correlation function goes from 0 to 2 pi as we go around the vortex point. So this is the vortex point. So we go around, and it changes from 0 to 2 pi 6 times. And that means that this particular realization has a topological charge 6. So the phase of the correlation function depends on 2 parameters. One of them is local, means it exists in every point and is the same in every point. And this is the parameter that characterizes the handedness of light. And the second one is the topological, and it is a function of azimuthal component, so azimuthal angle. And this has it changes with the topological charge just as you see here. So the topological charge can be expressed via the properties of the 2 beams in a very simple way, and it's a highly flexible value, highly collapsible number, we have chosen 6, but we have chosen something else as well. Now, what you will see if you shine this light into molecules and look at highly nonlinear response. So we look at high harmonics, and what you see, the harmonic 18 and a harmonic for right function and left function. And we see now a near field image. So this is the image in space. And you see that there are 6 hotspots in each of the cases. But now if you look really hard into it, you will see that 2 images are rotated with respect to each other. And the angle of rotation is topologically protected in a sense that it has to be pi divided by topological charge, which in our case is 30 degrees. So then what you know that whenever you do your measurement, these 2 circles, they will be offset, and they will be offset in a way which is completely guaranteed. Now, what is basically controls the rotation of these circles is the following phase. It's a topological phase, which we already discussed, a chiral phase, which describes the Hennenness of light, and there is also molecular phase, which characterizes the property of the molecule. It's unique for molecule, which means the rotation of these circles will be different in different molecules. And you can watch as it evolves in time if you look at different harmonics in principle. Now I would like to address the question of robustness. So what we wanted to see, what if we look at the system, which is very dilute, and it has very small enantiomeric axis, near 0. So enantiomeric axis is the difference between amount of left and right molecules in the mixture. So we look at this value, and we plot well, first, let me explain you once again. So what you see here now are far field images of the same harmonic 18 in right and left function. You see the same 6-fold structure, and it is rotated in one with respect to another. Now you think, okay, how I quantify rotation in a simple way, and you can simply take a Fourier transform of this function and its component at frequency 6. And because these and these are rotated with respect to each other, such that where there is a minimum here, there is a maximum here, if you look at the phase of this Fourier transform, it will be jumping by pi exactly when the enantiomeric axis changes sign, exactly when you go from left to right. And this is a very sharp transition, and in fact, you can even call it topological transition, so because it's controlled really by the topology of the system. Now, what you understand, okay, it's very sharp, which means that we have a very good accuracy around 0 enantiomeric axis. But now you would like to add noise and see how it changes. So what we added is 10% intensity fluctuations in our beams, because this is really what you would expect as a source of imperfections. And the red curve here shows the result, and you see that the jump is still reproduced quite nicely because it is still quite sharp. So you can still resolve very small numbers. What we learned next, we were really happy about this result, but what we realized is that what also happens in the experiment, that you can have imperfect circularity, which means that one of your beams can be not perfectly circular, but can be elliptic with a very high value of ellipticity, but still ellipticity not 1, which means that you will have a mixture of co-rotating beam and a little bit of counter-rotating beam. And then if you use our formula for the topological charge, what you will find out that there will be actually second topological charge suddenly in the system. And here you go with your robustness. It kind of goes to garbage. And that was really frustrating for us. And we thought, okay, how we can fight it? And what we realized that actually we can in the measurement, we can separate the two topological charges. And it's not so difficult to do. So what can you do? I told you that we have now a mixture of left circularly polarized light for the frequency omega, for example, although we expected to have right circularly polarized light. So which means you have elliptical polarization, and if you have ellipse, you have additional degree of freedom because the ellipse can rotate in space depending on the relative phase between two counter-rotating components. And here you see this. So this is ellipse, and if the phase between this and this is 0, then it will look like this. If it's pi, it will look like this. So it's rotating. So what you do, you can record your signal, and the relative phase you can actually control in the experiment. So what you do, you can record your signal as a function of this relative phase and simply do Fourier transform with respect to this phase, and different harmonics will give you access to different topological charges in your measurement. So we extracted the topological charge 2, and it appears in the first harmonic, and you see we still recover rotations. Now, because the topological charge is 2, you have not 6 blobs, but 2 blobs, but you still have a very nice contrast. What else is nice is that once you have the elliptically polarized light, you have light which is globally chiral, has the same head mass everywhere, and the enantiosensitive signal shows not only in rotation, but also in total intensity. So with this, I will turn to the second subject, which is the topology in ultrafast electron response. For that, I need to remind you key concept that connects the topology in electron response, connect electron response and topology. So these are the quantities which are known as curvature and geometric phase. So you know that in topology, in a lot of cases, we want to characterize the shape of objects, and we want to do it as if we could not look at the object from a side, as if we were living on the object and could not really leave it. So in fact, you don't really need to leave object to characterize its shape. You can simply walk on it, and this walk will record the phase. This geometric phase will allow you to distinguish between flat surfaces and curved surfaces, just as you see in this picture. So this is the phase, which is accumulated between these two vectors, and as we transport them along the surface, and in this case, we again have two vectors, and we transform them along the surface, and there is no phase accumulated because there is no angle between this vector and this vector, which is accumulated. So this property accumulated due to geometry is called geometric phase. Now you can imagine that you could also introduce a local quantity, which would be a local density of this phase. So phase per square centimeter, for example. And that is called curvature. Now, why would you care about this curvature? It turns out that it has very solid physical meaning. And to explain it, let me give you an example of a system which would be, in which configuration space would be characterized by two angles. Then the configuration space of this system is a torus. And let electrons live in this configuration space. So because they live in the configuration space, the trajectories in which they move, they will be controlled by the configuration space. So the trajectories will curve. But electrons which move on these curved trajectories obviously emit fields, and these fields record the geometry of the surface. And they are called geometric fields, and the whole concept is called geometric magnetism. So it turns out that curvature, which is known from topology, is one of such fields. And it is known in condensed matter that it can lead to new observables of a topological character. Such observables, for example, appear in a Hall effect or anomalous thermal conductivity. There is
a family of so-called anomalous observables proportional to Berry curvature. Now the question is, chiral molecules, they kind of have very clear geometry. Should there be a field, geometric field associated with chiral molecules? And if it is there, and in particular with electron currents, because we can imagine that as these currents run, they somehow feel the chirality of the molecule. Could it be that it gives rise to a geometric field? And if it's the case, could it be that it leads to new observables? And then, if it is, let us think what could be the configuration space relevant for these currents. Just to start to get ball rolling, let us excite the ultrafast dynamics in our chiral molecule. Ultrafast dynamics means very simple that I take a short pulse, and short pulse simply means that I have a appreciable bandwidth so that I can excite at least a superposition of two states. So superposition of two states means I excite a current. So I excite a current in the molecule, and now I'm asking a question, what is the geometry associated with this current? To understand the geometry, the best is to watch the movie. So let us watch the movie, and what you see here are the currents which are excited in the chiral molecule in the transition that I described. So two excited state and transition from the ground state. And what you see that in left and right enantiomers, they trace helices, and these helices are of opposite chirality. So there is again example of temporal chirality which is local, because I'm again now using the same concept. I'm following the tip of the current vector. So it's again a property which encoded temporally, which encoded locally. And what we are asking today is how temporal and local chirality can be expressed via the geometric properties. So not structural, but really temporal. And we are interested in what is the configuration space. Okay, let us look at the randomly oriented molecules. So I'm dealing all the time with randomly oriented molecules, the most typical setup for the gas phase experiments. And if we have randomly oriented molecules and there is a circularly polarized pulse which comes and excites these molecules, so there is an interaction which is a dipole interaction, R dot E, R is electron coordinate, E is the laser field, and that evolves in time. So now we see that these molecules are randomly oriented, and the angle between the electron and the field, which is encoded here, in fact, it will be really different in all these molecules. And it's probably easier to appreciate it if we go into molecular system and we fix molecule. But then our light comes with all possible directions. And it's very clear now as we transport the light into the molecular frame is that this is a laser-controlled coupling between electronic and rotational degree of freedom of the molecule. So rotational degree of freedom is our configuration space. Now, as I told you, for every orientation, I would excite a current, which depends very sensitively on this angle. So I will have a bunch of these currents, and the next question I'm asking, what is the connection between, say, this current and this current? And you may ask me a question, what do you actually mean? What kind of connection could be? It's a way too abstract question. So let us think about it a little bit more, and what we can realize that we can solve Schrödinger equation for every configuration. I'm trying to get, For every configuration, fixed configuration of fixed angle, we can solve Schrödinger equation locally, fixing the angles and find the wave function. Then we can move on to a new configuration and again run equation, Schrödinger equation, and again solve it. But this wave function will never know about this wave function. And what I'm asking, and the phase of this one and on this one, we know they are both defined up to the phase, so the phases will be arbitrary. So what I'm asking, is there a phase which characterizes all these geometries globally, which characterizes how they all merge together in this global space. So now how we answer this question? Okay, so it turns out that there is a connection which lives in the space of laser field orientations, and connection is given by the gradient with respect to orientations from the electronic wave function. And there is a curvature, and there is a phase. So the phase, the geometric phase, and the curvature have a very important meaning. They lead to new observables. I will show you observables due to the curvature, and the geometric phase is equal to enantiosensitive component of excitation yield or photoionization yield. So it's a yield. Now, observables related to curvature. So I will briefly show, because I'm running out of time, I will briefly show you two observables, and they are both related to the orientation of the molecule. So what I will show you that we will use a pump probe setup, we will excite a current, and we will then photoionize it to see what is the effect of the geometry. What I skipped, because I could not, because I don't have much time, is that Berry curvature always requires violation of inversion symmetry and time reversal symmetry. So currents are absolutely necessary to excite the curvature. It is a fundamentally non-equilibrium property and property controlled by the laser field, or rather by the mutual orientations of the molecule and the laser field. So this is the first observable, which is the curvature now, which emerges due to the current excited in bound state. So what we take circularly polarized pulse, we excite the molecule, and then there is a time delay, and we ionize the molecule. What is the effect? The effect is enantiosensitive molecular orientation of cations. So the mechanism is the following. Molecules where the curvature, which is due to excitation, aligned with the propagation vector of the pulse, they will be excited preferentially. And linear probe will just remove this excited electron so that we could probe the cations. So we'll have an anti-sensitive orientation of cations, which is also delay dependent. So here I show you the degree of the orientation of the molecule in space. It's calculated for propylene oxide, LUMO plus 1 superposition. So this is the molecule. This is a specific direction of curvature in this case. And molecule aligns itself, orients itself in such a way that this is along the propagation direction. So you will have, you can also address the degree of orientation. It's a quite huge effect. You have 65 out of 100 ions, 65 will be looking up like this, and the other one, 35% will be looking up oppositely. And if you, it's an anti-sensitive effect, so if you choose right molecules, then they will be oriented exactly oppositely. Now you can also have this effect due to electronic currents associated with the photoionization. And this is what you see here. Again, there will be curvature, and the molecules in which curvature, it's randomly oriented molecules, each of them has curvature defined in molecular frames, so there will be molecules in which curvature is along the propagation vector. Those will be preferentially ionized, and those will form these oriented ions. And if you look at the degree of orientation, it's completely different because it's based on the geometry of continuum states, and also it can trace this kind of trajectory if you change the frequency of the photon with which you ionize. So effect is again large, 60 to 40, and an anti-sensitive. And the very last slide, obvious direction that we followed is to connect this to spin, because spin naturally breaks time reversal symmetry. I do not need to create current anymore, and I can look at curvature at the stationary states, including ground state. So now what I'm saying is that we do the same, we do a photoionization from the ground state with circularly polarized pulse, and we have spin up and spin down electron. So what happens is that curvature associated with spin up and spin down electron has different direction in the molecular frame, and therefore, if you take randomly oriented molecules and shine circularly polarized light, then molecules in which spin of the removed electron was spin up, but the spin is also mapped into the cation is exactly down. So the molecules in which spin of the electron was up will be oriented like here, and the molecules corresponding to spin down will be oriented like this. So these are two different orientations, and what you get is that orientation of the molecule, orientation of the cation is linked, connected to its spin. So it's also a very interesting new effect. So I have, shows the ionizing sensitivity. I have no time to go much further, but I'll just mention one more topological effect really quickly because it's real fun. So what Astrid figured out that if you photoionize a chiral molecule, then the photoionization dipole, it's complex dipole, so dipole and its phase. If you analyze the geometry of this dipole, you will find that there are Möbius strips in the photoionization dipoles. And as you switch from left to right molecule, Möbius strip changes its chirality. And this is the energy shell. So you ionize molecule, you look at the electrons, and you look at all directions for given value of energy. So this is the two spheres. And what I plot is the phase of the photoionization dipole for these cases. And what you see, there is a singularity, phase singularity. It actually corresponds to these two Möbius strips. So this is H2O2 left, and this is H2O2 right. What is cool about it that if you integrate around over this line around the singularity, you will get enantiosensitive topological invariant, which is a quantized phase. So if you manage to characterize the photoionization of chiral molecules such that you reconstruct both phase and amplitude of the dipole, and this is what in attoseconds methods we usually do, then you can integrate it and you can get your robust signal in one molecule. In the other molecule for the same point, you will get nothing because these 2 points, they are in different positions. Thank you very much. I did not get to tell you about non-Hermitian dynamics. I'll just go to conclusions. Thank you.
Okay. Very nice talk. It's time for questions. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Olga. Beautiful talk. So a lot of the topological stuff was inspired from solids, and now you brought it to chiral molecules. I was wondering if you saw any potential to now go back the other way and apply this local chirality idea to studying solids.
Excellent question. Thank you so much for this question. Yes, I did think about it. In particular, vial semimetals, which are 3D chiral. So the issue with this chirality that is 3D, it's different from the chirality when we talk about it in materials where it's normally 2D, but vial semimetals would be an example. And first of all, there was a paper in 2017, the first author, Fernando de Joan, in Nature Comms, which was showing that the yield in circle of photohalvanic effect, and this effect is the following. So you have conduction, valence and conduction band, you apply circularly polarized light, and you transfer population. And this actually transfer will be enantiosensitive in a sense that if you are in the left node, then current will, for example, go up with respect to propagation direction, and if right, it will go down. And this mirrors the chiral effects in molecules. Now, what they have shown is that the conductivity is characterized by the flux of the Berry curvature, and therefore potentially can be quantized. So what I feel that most likely, okay, so they have derived it under the assumption that you consider only two bands. If it's two bands, then it's exact. If there is not a two band, then there are corrections, and then it's not like this. So in our case, it's exactly two, and I think what you can say that this is the flux of the geometric field. I did not get to talk about this geometric field, but I think this is the thing which characterizes it. This is first, and second is that it would be very interesting to look at Weyl semimetals, and in particular in the effect of chiral anomaly, when you can drive the Weyl fermions from one chiral node to another. And usually people do it with electric and magnetic field in collinear setup. So this is polarization of magnetic, this is electric, and it's chiral then. What you can do is to apply synthetic chiral light, and it's also chiral, but it's chiral in a different way. In this way, you couple to spin, and in this way, you couple to orbital momentum. So you would have then nonlinear mechanism of transporting the chiral carriers from left to right, which based not on the spin, but on the orbital momentum. So this, I think, also would be super interesting to look at.
There, right?
I want to understand the light pulses that you're using better. These are light pulses that are so short that this vector that you draw, if you like, is the actual vector during that single light pulse. So it's really only one cycle of the field.
So basically, this is not needed. It does not have to be short. What is important is frequency locking. So the specific, for example, specific setup that we use to create this potato chip light is the following. It's non-collinear geometry, omega field polarized like this, and 2 omega field polarized like this, phase locked. And then you recombine them like this under small angle. And then what happens, because you have omega field like this, you have elliptical field with forward ellipticity. This is the propagation direction, forward ellipticity. And you have 2 omega field like this. Now, because you're in grating geometry, you have a grating of ellipticity, and you have a grating of 2 omega field. And by using these phases, you align these two gratings of 2 omega field and ellipticity in such a way that they change sign at the same time, synchronously. And that's how you have a globally chiral light, because it's either like this or like that. So it just rotates, but it's globally chiral. It does not have to be short, and it's maybe better if it's not short, because that gives you stability, it gives you spectral resolution, and subcycle feature, it's a property of a phasing, different phases between different components in nonlinear response. So, and that is what you have in a short pulse, because in a short pulse you have octave, you can mix this and this, but you just take these two frequencies and it works just as well.
Thanks.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you for this very nice talk here. Very nice and very clear explanations of quite a complex topic. So I would like to ask you about this chiral light, the structure of this chiral light. I suppose that it is evolving in space along all the Rayleigh length. So will this be a difficult experimentally, or this is?
So at the moment, there is experiment running in Imperial College, and David Ayuza, who actually comes from Zaragoza, and he's a my very nice Spanish friend and my guide into Spanish culture. So he's in Imperial College, and he supervises a student in the John Maranga's lab, and they are putting together this setup that I explained, a little bit simpler. You can do it a little bit simpler. And they have seen signal. So they are now, whatever experimentalists always take the setup apart when they see a signal, then they want to destroy everything for some reason. Anyway, so they need to weight. There is no particularly, at the moment, the key word is that you would like to use optically thin medium. You would like to come before the focus so that you don't suffer from the GUI phase, because what the GUI phase does, it will flip the relationship between phases. And here you will have, before focus, you have left-handedness, then right-handedness. So you offset the focus. And for example, what is now very trendy is to do experiments with liquid jet, but it's seen anyway. But you could also have a molecular jet, and they also seen basically. So if you go into a cuvette, then what happens is that, of course, omega and 2 omega, they will propagate with different velocity, and you can have a phase mismatch, which will ruin the thing. So for liquids, I think you would probably be okay with a couple of microns of propagation, but then that's it for thick liquids.
Okay, I think that it's time to wrap up. So we thanks again Olga